Hello, this is Janet from janetsandberg.com, and you're listening to the Phoenix Wisdom Podcast, the weekly show that talks to peers and professionals who open up about their darkest moments when they felt like ending it all, why they didn't, and how they transformed their lives in order to triumph over the darkness and despair. Please remember to subscribe if you'd like to hear more inspiring stories. Thank you for being here today on today's episode of Phoenix Wisdom. Today we are joined by Johnny Young, who is, I think, perhaps our first male guest on the podcast. So this is
You
very
go.
exciting.
Oh man.
Different
Oh,
perspectives are always welcome.
so some groundbreaking stuff going on. I didn't know that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, that's
Awesome.
fantastic because I will be an open book for you to pick apart. So hopefully I have something to give you.
Excellent. Well, let's just start by telling the people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So obviously you got the name out of the way, Johnny Young. That for me is I typically go by that now professionally and personally. Because I have a couple other nicknames and then my real name, and it's just they kind of die off over some time. But yeah, I'm a father of six kids, one of which is not, or we'll say I never got the privilege of meeting, and another one who is my oldest daughter. Um, that I don't have custody of, and that I seemingly apparently can't get custody of. Um, and so that kind of gives you, I guess, a little bit of insight in some inner turmoil that's constantly going on. Um, I am a cinematographer. I kind of travel all over the US and predominantly like the Midwest. And I'm all over Indiana because that's where I live. And, the surrounding states, I'm always finding work in. So I'm constantly on the road. And yeah, it keeps me busy. And, it keeps me wanting for my family when I'm gone. And when I'm home, it keeps me wanting for more work, which is, I think I've struck gold and that I've found a perfect, middle ground. And, I'd say it's pretty good. So
Awesome.
those are just a few little tidbits. I think we'll get into some deeper stuff here in a little bit.
We will. We will. Thank you for sharing that. Um, yeah, so let's just dive right into the reason why we're here, talking
Yeah.
about our mental health and past suicidal ideations and the darkness that we have experienced. So, what was going on in your life when you were there?
Oh goodness, what wasn't going on in my life? So I'll preface that portion with saying, so I served in the Marine Corps, and getting out of the Marine Corps for me was a huge culture shock. So
Yes.
um, I had kind of dedicated everything I had to it, and it was for me the career that I was going to basically die with.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of consumed me, and not in the way that I think I hoped. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so once I got out, there was a lot of turmoil. I got married while I was in the Marine Corps,
Mm-hmm.
to my high school sweetheart, and we had kids and all that fun stuff. But going into the Marine Corps is one person, and then coming out thinking you're the same person, but you're not, was a big mental and emotional struggle for me for years. I think I struggled with that for about 5 years or so. I wouldn't say like lying to my wife, but I think I needed to be, and I think men in general feel like they need to be the rock and they've got to be
Yeah.
so solid. And we had kids, and so that was what I was. And so we kind of move a little bit further in the timeline. Me and my wife had grown apart, not even really by her doing at all. She was very active in um, trying to make things work, and trying to do more than what could be asked of any spouse on either side. And um, I had just completely detached myself inadvertently, um, and it really got bad. It really hit ahead when I actually had a seizure, August 24th of 2018, which was actually my wedding anniversary.
Oh my gosh.
Um, yeah, that was a whole thing. But I woke up with like a completely distorted memory. So
Mm.
I had the seizure at work, first thing in the morning. It was like 3 hours later, I really started kind of coming to, and um, I just had this like moment. I looked at my wife and I was like, I know that you're my wife. Like, I know that's what you're supposed to be for me, but like, I could not care less if you disappeared right now. And
Wow.
I think that was like the probably the first hurdle for me that really started kind of shaping uh, basically where I had let life take me. Um, so we struggled with that. We tried to work it out, and it got to a point I was like, things are not changing for me. Like, I don't feel any different. We had kids, and I thought my kids were great, and they didn't really notice, and they weren't affected, really. And I had some distancing from them, and um, I love kids, so for me it was like, well, it was nature, or second nature for me to connect with them. And um, then it just kind of, after that seizure, I was trying to basically fake it till you make it for a
Hmm.
couple of years, thinking, okay, everything's going to be great, whatever. Um, and then 2021, February, I believe it was. Yeah, February of 2021, my wife, I think I was out doing something, I don't remember, but came home, and my wife and her family were packing her stuff, and they took or had me load my kids, which at the time was my three boys, and one of which was, he wasn't even a year old. He had just been born November 18th of the previous year. And I loaded them into the car. I came into the house, and I broke in the biggest way possible. I don't really, I think I've shared that a few times, probably with my therapist, but definitely not publicly. Because part of it, I think, for me, is it's kind of humiliating, but at the same time, it's the truth.
Hmm.
I lost my family, which, for me at the time, like, I'd had this dissociation with my wife, but um, my kids were everything, like
Yeah.
everything to me. And so her family was like cold shoulder. They didn't care. Like, my wife was filing for divorce. Nothing mattered. Like, she was done, and she wasn't giving me a cold shoulder, but you could definitely feel the separation. And um, her family was really notorious too for because all of her sisters, I think, except for one now, are married, divorced, and basically took everything from the father, including
Mm.
kids, and they're all okay with it. They all think it's a normal, okay thing for kids to grow up without their dads, and to be replaced. Um, so it caused a lot. It caused a lot of turmoil.
Absolutely.
So then, um, for me, like, during our separation, um, it was a lot like, she lived in a different city. I lived in a different city. And it was, we'll say, pretty hard. There were a couple times, like, she was going out and hanging out with some people that, I was like, whatever. And she definitely made an active decision to make it appear like she was very much sought after, I would say.
Mhm.
That, I mean, which isn't a big deal. It doesn't bother me. I think my wife's absolutely stunning, and she doesn't think that about herself. But she wanted me to hurt, and she wanted me to know, like, okay, you have this separation, and we didn't have any issues with the kids, and that kind of became apparent. Um, but then during our separation, I ended up with this girl who now I realize basically just wanted to get pregnant, and my wife was doing her thing, I was doing mine, and this woman ended up pregnant and split. She went down to North Carolina because that was where she was from, and some time came and went, and then I find out she's pregnant, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do? How do I handle this situation? um, which, I mean, that alone caused a lot of turmoil for me and my wife, and despite like being separated and wanting to do our own thing, it was like, okay, well, it's one thing to like go out and date and whatever, but it's a whole other thing to be like, oh my gosh, like now he's having a baby with this other woman,
Right.
uh, who in turn, when it, it came down to it, um, and by the way, I'm leading up to the whole thing. It's kind of a big thing.
Yeah, I can see all the pieces coming together and the
Yeah.
pressure is mounting. Yeah.
Um, and so we get to a certain point, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm a very committed person when it comes to my children. I love them with everything I have. I want to give them everything I have. And this woman essentially gave me an ultimatum, was like, make sure you leave your wife, make sure you leave your children, and you're going to be dad full time to our child, and that's going to be it. And you can visit your kids, or your kids can come visit you, but that's, yeah, that.
Mm.
So
Mm.
as you can imagine, and I knew this woman, I knew her, or knew her husband before they had divorced, and I watched her manipulate and abuse and, um, basically coerce this man into anything and everything that she wanted. And so I knew how this was going to go. I had
Right.
already had this idea of who this woman was. Um,
Well, thank goodness for that.
yeah. Yeah. But when I had a kid, it has to all go out the window, because I'm, in my mind, I'm like, well, what do I do? I've got this kid. I have to be a parent to this child. I can't imagine having a child out in the world that I can't be with. Um, and so that turned into a whole thing, and it became a very manipulative, very controlling situation. And I kind of was like stuck in the middle. Like, I now at this point had started, like, I will say, visiting regularly and seeing and spending time with my wife. And I was like, I just want to be there. Like, even with my kids, like if we're great and things are good there, I can see my kids more. And then over time, it built into, now I really want a relationship with my wife again. Like, I started actively pursuing and trying to date her again. Um, but that, I guess, really kind of before that, the turmoil was, I'm separated. My wife really doesn't want anything to do with me. Her family has actively told me they don't want me around, that they want her to divorce me to this day. Even that's all they want. They want me out of the picture. um, we've been together now for 12 years, and we're the only ones that haven't been married and divorced, the only ones, except for one of her sisters, and that's a whole other situation. um, and then had a child on the way that I didn't have access to. I'd been told I'm, the worst possible human being because I wasn't moving actively to North Carolina to see her. When I had, at the time, three other children in Indiana, and my two oldest boys, or my two oldest children, who are my oldest boys as well, they don't know anything about me being gone, or basically making the decision of, this child is more important than you. which is what essentially the ultimatum I was given or really
Yeah.
felt like. Um, and I couldn't do that, and I got pretty torn. Amongst all of that drama, I had about what 65 $75,000 that was stolen from me in tools.
Oh my gosh.
I was an automotive technician, and the shop let someone come in that they thought was okay. I was out for a couple of days because my youngest son was sick, so I had to be home with him.
Hmm.
And somebody in that time came into the shop, took all my tools. The shop knew and let this person go to my tools and take the whole toolbox and everything. Um, and when I went to work that following Monday, they asked me why I was even there. I was like, well, I showed up to work. I don't understand what's going
I
on.
work here.
Yeah. And the service manager looked at me and he was like, well, we have a problem because your tools are gone. And I was like, well, why would my tools be gone? That's weird. He was like, well, some guy came in, said your reason you weren't in was because you were transferring to another shop, and so we just let him take your stuff. And I was like, oh, and then that didn't go anywhere because they didn't and wouldn't cover any expenses or
Oh
tools or anything
my
like that.
gosh.
Um, so I lost essentially my business because I was also running a business on the side, doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I made, I'd make a really healthy income from this shop, but then I'd make a pretty healthy income on the side, which I mean, most of it was under the table, not really taxed, but to have like a cushion, so to
Yeah.
speak, was for me was fantastic. Um, so I lost that, and then now I was kind of like trying to make anything work. I worked as a waiter at a Texas Roadhouse, and it was absolutely miserable. A lot of the people I worked with were pretty great, but they have the same complaints that most people have, like when you're in the restaurant industry. And I knew it wasn't for me. I was barely making any money. I was door dashing even to try to like break even. Really, it was more of like I just have to pay the bills.
Yeah.
I could barely do that. um, and all of these things like together. There was this one particular night that my wife went out to a concert, and she told me about it, but I didn't really know. I knew about the concert because I was working at Texas Roadhouse, and all these people were coming in because they're like, yeah, the concert's down the road, and it's usually pretty packed. So I found out that they were going, and through the whole night I'm like, oh man, like something's off. Like I don't like this. I don't like the feeling of her being at a concert with her sister, which was actively trying to cheat on her husband, like very regularly, because she didn't feel it anymore. So that was what her justification was. And I just, as I went through the night, I was like, me and my wife had our own issues, and she was like, and I was trying to plead with her, like, I need you. Like, that's all I need. Like, all this could go away. I just need you. And she was like, no, I don't want anything to do with you right now. I'm gonna basically be out here. I'm gonna enjoy myself. I'm gonna be flirted with. I'm gonna be, whatever. Because I didn't know what she had expected and wanted to do. But like those types of concerts, I mean, that's the stuff that happens. So I was like, all right, well, I know. But I tried to talk to her. I tried to find her. I even drove out to her house that night after this concert was done, because I just wanted to show her and prove to her, like, this is it. Like, this is all I want. I can't deal with all the outside noise anymore. Like, you're my rock. And she was like not having it. You wouldn't respond to texts, emails, like phone calls, none of it. And that night I was like, I think this is it. I think everything's done. I've lost her. I've she's gonna basically submit to her family, which we'd had a track record of that happening, to where
Hmm.
whatever the family wanted, she would give in because she's the youngest child. um, and I was like, well, I guess this is it. And I remember that night I was sitting outside with this, like, next to these apartments, there was this little tiny, like, retention pond with a fountain and a little bench thing. And I was like, you know what? I said, I think this is it. I think this is the last that I want to deal with this. Like, I can't keep my job. Like, I'm not happy in my job. My wife's not happy with me. She doesn't want me, and she's making it very clear, like, she has other things going on, and I'm not gonna, essentially matter.
Mhm.
Um, and then I was like, my kids, they're doing fine without me. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do there. And then I was like, I also have this other child that I'm probably never going to have a chance to know, because her mom was absolutely horrible human being. And I I don't know. In that moment, I'd set myself up. Like, I told myself everything that I felt like I needed to hear to justify me just ending it right there.
Mhm. Well,
And
yeah, the overarching feeling, like, nobody wants me, nobody needs me,
yeah,
and you just
exactly.
yeah,
And
that's
and and
it's a
being
lot.
unsuccessful in my careers
Yeah.
and just stonewalling everywhere I went. And I'm just like, okay. So I remember going up to my apartment that night, and I just remember I had these bar stools, and I had a really nice, like, kitchen. It was great, and at this bar top. And I just remember, so I had a few different guns at the time, but I just remember the one, and it was one of the ones that I would carry around pretty regularly. And I just remember taking every bullet out, unloading it and reloading it, unloading it and reloading
Oh
it,
my gosh.
and just kept going through this cycle. And eventually I got to a point, I'm like, all right, I can't unload and reload this anymore. If I'm going to do it, I need to do it. I was like, my doors are locked. No one's going to know anything. Like, they'll show up and it'll be too late. And, my kids won't have to see it. They'll just know that I'm gone. And I
Mhm.
spent, gosh, I probably spent, and it was probably either shorter or it was longer. But in the moment, it felt like, you know, a while.
Yeah.
Um, but in this moment, I just, like, I got tired of the unload and reload, and I was just sitting there, and I was just like, it was pretty risky. Like, I know how to handle a weapon, especially from
Yeah.
the Marine Corps, but I just remember sitting there like this, just like this, and I had my hand on the trigger the whole time, and I was just like, it's just gonna happen. I'm just not even gonna realize it, and that's gonna be how it goes. And I just sat there, and I don't remember why I put it down. I really don't. I know it wasn't like a profound, like, thing. I just remember putting it down, and I went and I laid in my bed, and I probably slept for probably 18 hours, something
Wow.
like that. It
Yeah.
was ridiculous. Um, and then, I got out kind of, I really wouldn't even say out. I just, the next day, it was like, oh, I got to act like that didn't happen, and I have to, move on. And that's kind of just, I guess, what I did. I mean, I didn't really have this big, sort of this super big moment, or I guess I did, but it didn't come until later. Like,
Mhm.
it was just this unexplainable, like, I have to put this down, like, and I need to go to bed. And when I describe things to people, so, like, when I met my wife, we were in high school. First time I saw her, I instantly knew. I was like, this woman is going to be the woman I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And, like, and I had, but oddly enough, I was seeing this other girl. We split up at this dance, left because we were at a homecoming dance, and we were together. We split up there. I walked away, looked for another friend that I was going to try to hang out with, or start, like, right off the gate dating or whatever. And then I met my wife, and I really hadn't even met her yet, just saw her, and I was like, this is it. Like, this woman, like, everything about her, from the way she looked to her attitude to her smile, all these little things. And I was like, this, like, if I've ever had a profound, like, something is telling me this is it, it was then. And I would say this was more subdued and quieter, but it's like, I don't know, like something just had me put it down and walk away. Like I just needed to rest. I needed
Mm-hmm.
I needed to do something and I didn't even know it. And then, after that, everything kind of started, or that's when, the next day or whatever, I started like trying to turn everything around. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully I
Wow.
went on a huge tangent there, but like I had a
No. There's
lot that played into this.
yeah, a lot of different pieces all coming together that just sort of culminates in one day. You're just like, wow,
Yeah.
you know,
It becomes so,
things suck. Everything sucks.
yeah. And
Um,
at
yeah,
some point, I think we just, I think everybody has a tolerance for what they can handle. And, some are higher than others. And I think it just, at some point, it just becomes so extremely overwhelming that you can't
yeah,
handle it anymore.
yeah.
And
It just wears us down.
yeah. And if, a lot of times I've heard, I don't remember where I heard it, and it's not even any profound thing, but, life is always going to beat you down. And it's not about, how long you stay down, it's how you get back up. Uh,
Hmm.
and sometimes like people are defeated like when they go down, and that's kind of where I was. And I honestly at that point was like, I have just no reason, none. Like I don't even
Hmm.
care. I don't feel bad for myself or anyone around me. Like I'm done. I just don't know why I'm even wasting my time in this, like, what, like, merry-go-round is what it felt like. Like it's the
Yeah.
same thing on repeat, and you just can't find your way off. And
Hmm.
so as it just keeps going, you're like, eventually you just kind of get dizzy, and you're like, well, if I just let go, I'll be thrown off, and at least
Right.
I'll be off.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It just kind of, things just, for me, it was just like, put it down and like move, I guess, really just move,
Yeah.
just
Just go
don't like,
somewhere else.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And sleeping, the fact that you slept for like 18 hours afterwards is also just like, your mind and your body sort of recalibrating, right?
yeah.
And just processing everything that just happened.
And it
And
was hard. And I don't know, you get, it's like the culmination of everything, just saying, like, changing your internal clock and changing the way you think about time, and you think about everything that happens around you. um yeah, I mean, I think I hit that wall, and I don't have a really great reason for stepping away, because I was committed. Like I was ready to go. Like one of the things that, like, my oldest boys, I teach them now, like, anytime you see, any kind of firearm, like one of the things you just never do, like you don't point it at anything.
mhm,
Which, I mean, there's more technical, better ways to tell it, but when you're talking to younger kids, it's like,
right.
well, you simplify it. And you don't put your finger on the trigger at all. Like you just keep it off. You can touch everything else. If you just avoid the trigger and you hold it firm, then you're far less likely to have, an accident or something like that, in the case they ever get a hold of something. And I basically broke every rule. I was like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Those were things that were ingrained into me. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So you had the moment, you had some inner knowing telling you to, just walk away, and you did, thankfully.
Yeah.
You slept for
Thankfully.
18 hours, and then you said you just got up and had a new, like, perspective on
Yeah. I,
everything.
I It wasn't immediate. I think it came to me. I kind of got to a point after that. I was like, I knew, I was like, I can't keep doing this to myself. Like,
Hmm.
why am I allowing these things to happen to me? Which really is what it came down to. I was the one, I think I was quick to blame me personally, but like I realized like I was the one allowing all this junk in my life, and allowing these thoughts which still haunt me. I mean, I still
Mm-hmm.
deal with that. But I was the one that was allowing it to happen and control me, and make the decisions in my life for me. Um, and I had basically just decided to just like take things a little bit at a time. I mean, that was all I could do. And I ended up shortly after that, while I was working at Texas Roadhouse, I told myself, I'm done with this. I hate this job. Um, I kind of gave myself the attitude of like, you know, I'm okay to like walk out at any moment. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, it's not that I'm above the job, and it's also not that I'm above anybody else, because some of the best people I've ever known actually still work at this particular location, and they're amazing people. And if I ever get the chance, which I mean I have, I go back, I talk to them, I update them where I'm at. Like they want to know, like, what's going on in my career, and where I went to after. But I basically just I told myself, I was like, this merry-go-round is not going to continue. I can't let it happen. Um, I ended up going back to school because of that, because I wanted to just do something different. I wanted to, I think for a long time, I didn't feel myself moving forward. And I was like, what's one of the most radical ways that I can make myself or force myself to move forward? And it was going to school. And when I did, I mean, I've always had these little things, like I can tune things out like you would never believe. And when I tune out, sometimes I can watch and it'll make sense for where I guess I went with my career, but like I can watch like these things play out in my head and I am just gone. And then when I come to, I'm like, I have to get this into the world. I have to put this out. And I remember talking with somebody at this school, and they were like, I described this whole thing to them pretty in depth, probably like a half-hour conversation about that alone. And they were like, you need to do something with this, because we don't have people that do this and that can describe it so vividly, and that also seem like so passionate about remembering the details of these things, as if it's like when you wake up from a dream and you remember every detail.
Right.
That's what it feels like, except it's,
So you're creating it consciously.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't get it out. And so I ended up going to school for cinematography. um, I ended up ridiculously good at it, which was fantastic, and that fulfilled that, like, that tank, if you will, that I had.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of men, especially, they get their identity from what they do, and
Yes.
uh, I think that's part what happened to me, is that my identity was in what I did for so long, that when I didn't have it, I
Mm-hmm.
completely lost who I was. And
Yes.
that caused problems in my marriage. It caused problems in future careers, emotionally, mentally, all of it. Like it messed me up. And then I
Yeah.
realized,
And I
like,
think that's like even more so when you're in the military.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and I had struggled even from when I got out of the Marine Corps, and it just drives you. And when I found something that I wanted to do and was like, all right, I'm going to do this, I committed or I made a commitment to myself that I wasn't going to focus so much on the me portion and how it's going to fulfill me. And I needed to focus more externally, because I couldn't sacrifice who I was anymore based off of the work that I do and how I identifiable within that career.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, a big thing for me. And now, I get to travel a lot. I'm quickly becoming one of the most sought after directors of photography in the Midwest.
Amazing.
I have friends in New York, and LA. Like I'm talking to a producer right now out in LA that one of my most recent movies that I did. It's not even completed yet because they're doing different phases of shooting.
Mm-hmm.
they saw some of the still shots from the work that I did, which I think you probably would have seen if you were on that Facebook page, when like how you found me.
Hmm.
Those were some from one of the most recent ones that I did, and now I'm talking to somebody out in LA that is doing another like period type thing, and so they're reaching out to
Amazing.
me to go out to LA. I've got a buddy now because of that in New York that's hooking me up with um, like one of the things that he works on is the Today Show. Um, and he was on Trading Spaces. He was one of the interior designers on
Oh,
Trading
okay.
Spaces. But he's got a lot of contacts in New York that he's like, I need to get you out here. I need to get you there. Um, and so like the work tank is filled. Like I
Yeah.
always like little work, but it seems like when I get the work, they're very large projects. Um, but then like if we start shifting over towards my marriage, for instance, after I made it through that, and I kind of kept going and was like, I have to pursue my wife, not even for myself. Um, but I had like my boys at the time, and I knew I had a daughter on the way with this other woman. Well, I quickly became of the mind like I need to become who I want my daughter to be with, because
Mm,
if I don't give her some opportunity, whether I don't get to see her, whether what anything, I have to at least give myself the chance to become the person that I would hope that my kid would want to be with. And that's pretty high, and I wasn't there. Like I have at least for my daughters especially got some pretty high demands. And so I'm like, if I'm going to hold somebody to those standards, I have to be of that same standard or higher. And that started in my marriage, and that quickly became, I've got to be the person that my wife deserves, and I've got to be the person that I want to be at the same time. So there was a lot of like, I wouldn't even say work that I had to put in, but more so forcing myself to regress into the person that I was before the military.
mm,
Um, and that, I mean, that's been the hardest thing, hands down. And as I've gotten through all of that, I mean, since then, we had my daughter, and that's got a whole set of issues that we definitely don't have time for. There's just a lot of control and a lot of
yeah.
possession there that it breaks my heart. And her mom doesn't want me to have any access to her and never wants me to see her because I didn't choose her, really,
Right.
not my
Yeah.
daughter but her. And um, that sucks, and it kills me. I deal with that every single day. But then my wife and I had our first daughter, and that was kind of the one that we'd been waiting for. We had her name picked out when probably 3 or 4 months after we started dating, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Already started like planning like the life that we would like to live, and obviously took a way, you know, a really hard left turn kind of thing. But um, we ended up having her, and we've struggled with having her just because she was born and we had to take her back to the hospital immediately after we had her, um, for a virus that the doctors had no idea about and didn't know how to even diagnose for a couple or like a week, something like that.
Mm,
So she had all these different tests and things. And um, I think as a father, when you watch or know that your daughter's got a needle going into her spine at
hmm.
6 days, 7 days old,
Oh my gosh.
that is horrific.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, we had to prepare because the doctors were basically telling us you're going to lose her because we can't fix her. And
Wow.
then we got through that, and now she's doing great. I mean, we have our own set of struggles that we're still trying to fight through, but it things worked out. I mean, had I made that decision, I would not have. I mean, I have my oldest daughter, who would in turn would have been my youngest daughter, but I wouldn't have my youngest daughter, who is
Hmm.
and very much so like the light of my world, as a dad, because I love my boys, I do, and I love roughhousing and playing with them and doing all the boy things. Like I coach their baseball teams, and we go out and practice and all that fun stuff. Um, but a girl really changes. Kids change your heart, but
They
like,
do.
but a little girl, for at least for a father, it completely destroys everything you knew about being a dad. And I am now the I used to be pretty rough with my kids and a little bit tougher on them. And then after having my daughter, I'm like, oh, man, like I can feel me being the biggest softy ever. And you just kind of things just kind of happen. So now I'm mentally, I mean, in a way better place. But I also see a therapist every week. Like, um, not even I wouldn't even say that it's like a requirement or anything like that, but the best version of myself can't happen and can't be present if I'm not actively trying to better myself and
Hmm.
maintain my emotional, we'll say, stability, um, and all the mental struggles that happen. Like they've got to be offloaded somewhere, and someone's got to help process those. And
Yeah.
I think as a man, probably for a long time, I was like, no, this mental illness thing is like not okay.
Yeah.
Being depressed, which I pretty actively, I mean, even now, like I struggle with depression, and we battle through that and talk about that, and um, being way more emotionally and mentally aware of that changes how you approach it.
Hmm. Oh,
Always
for
been,
sure.
I've always been pretty good at identifying my emotions. Um,
Excellent. That's a great skill to have.
it took a long time. It did. It's not an easy thing to do at all. And now I'm more so at the point where I'm like, I don't really care that about the emotions that I'm having, but I need to identify the roots of the
Yes.
emotion. Because if
Yeah.
I can identify the root of the emotion, it means I can identify how I need to navigate the emotion itself, which
Hmm.
for me, especially having kids and constantly trying to make things, as good as they can be with my wife, it's, I've got an expectation as a father, as a husband, as a man, and the things that were put on me when I was growing up, and who I had to be and how I had to be. Um,
Yeah.
I'm kind of going against all that, because in the world that my kids are going to grow up in, it's a lot different than when I grew up.
Yes.
I've got,
Thankfully,
yeah, and
where
I've
we can talk about these things and not
yeah,
have that expectation of, like you said, being the rock, because when you can still be the rock and have emotions
yeah,
and process them, but in the old fashioned way of being the rock was just to be very stoic and
exactly,
not
exactly,
let anything show. And
yeah.
that's, keeping everything inside is just um, trouble waiting to happen.
It is, and I think the worst part is, like, for me, I was never a very explosive person. I was always pretty implosive, and
Hmm.
I also would become very, we'll say, bitter towards myself, and very, oh, what's the right term? I don't even know right now. Uh, Basically, I got really good at, when I was down, putting myself down and
Yes.
starting to justify I deserve to feel this way.
Oh,
And now I'm like, even through like my depression and everything I just struggle with now, um, I still think about, the idea of suicide pretty often. And then I think to myself, like, not even that I want to do it, but
hmm.
more so it's there. And it was a result of a lot of the things I was allowing to happen. And I always bring myself to the point that there's like three different kinds of love, right? There's the kind of love that you would die for, the kind of love that you kill for, and then the third, which most often usually is overlooked, is the kind of love that you live for.
Mm.
And you know, my kids, I love. I would die for my kids. I would kill for my kids. Same thing with my wife. Um, but the best thing that I can do, both for myself and for my family, and really, I mean, the people that I work with, because like my best friend, for instance, he knows about all of this, for instance, and he's also a business partner of mine. And this last feature, we created things that most people only dream of as far as quality, but then we're working with A-list talent out in LA, and for us, it's like the best thing, or for me, it's like the best thing that I can do is live for them.
Yeah.
Because if I live, really, I wouldn't even say that I'm living for them. I'm living for me, for the love I have for them, because I don't want them to ever think that I love them so little that I wanted to go. I couldn't handle it, and they weren't worth me staying. Um,
Wow.
and I don't know. I think for me, as a father, as a man, as a now a business owner, which I didn't have at the time when I was just really just ready to go.
Hmm.
My life has taken a huge
Yeah.
turn after that, and I think that breaking that, well, I wouldn't even necessarily say cycle, but breaking through the mold of a man having to be stoic and a man having to be um, consistent in his emotions has got to change. It has to.
Absolutely. Yes.
Um, I think that the world has changed where, especially now, like I couldn't imagine it now, but like there's like the dating scene, for instance, is my best friend's trying to deal with it now, but there's on both sides, there's these standards that have to exist, and you can't, which he's actually gotten is like he's emotional, like his wife passed away a little over a year ago, and um, as he tries to date, I mean, he's getting the very, like, all these judgments that are there about
Mm.
men have to be this and that, and they can't be weak, which their version of weak is emotionally aware and emotionally conscious and willing to share and express those
And
emotions, which is a natural part of life. I mean, for the longest
yeah.
time, I think men just did it in private, and
Oh,
they
absolutely.
didn't
Yeah.
they didn't share it because they were afraid of being judged and being put down. And now that's a public thing. It doesn't even matter what you do; it's public. Like if you are a man and dealing with those emotions, I think there's two sides of it now, though. The side that everybody's like, yeah, we'll work with you, we'll help you, but then there's this other side that's like, no, you can't even feel that way or think that way. Um, and I think we're still on that shift, where,
Hmm.
where we're getting rid of that old mentality and moving more to the new mentality. But the pace is just so slow. It's you're gonna hit both sides. But yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
But I love just, the little takeaways in your story. Like when you decided to stay, the first thing you implemented was boundaries. And people are always talking about boundaries, right? But this is the concrete example. Like, I am not taking shit from anybody anymore. Like, I'm taking
yeah,
control of what I accept from other people and also from myself. No more negative self talk, no more putting
yeah,
myself down, just being aware of what's happening and saying, I'm not going to take it,
yeah,
and going forward from there. And then also finding that joy in life. Like, what am I really good at? What is my unique gift to the world?
yeah,
And doing that. And then, of course, the success and everything that comes from that. But you're not going to get that success unless you're loving what you do.
yeah. And
So the fact that you were able to, it's all of those things put together. you're able to move forward and control what other people say to you, do to you. I mean, obviously, you can't control them, but
Right.
controlling how you react to that and what you allow into your life,
Yeah.
and focusing on what makes you happy, what brings you joy,
Yeah.
and also getting that external support from people to keep you moving forward. So, going to
Yeah.
therapy and friends and family. And yeah,
Yeah.
you're a
And
beautiful example of,
and it's definitely not easy. I think that probably something that a lot of people don't, well, maybe they do talk about it, but they don't dive deep into it is, you know, like my wife and I, since we've been basically together, I've been pretty widely unaccepted by her family. I don't know why. I don't know why they continue to try to push me out, but like we don't have any emotional or mental support for our marriage at all. Um, it's very much so like if my wife sent a text and told them, hey, I'm going to divorce him, her sisters are the first, and her mom are the first to line up to say, when's the party? And that's hard, I think,
yeah,
as a man, because I'm not saying I'm perfect. Like I've done plenty to hurt my wife, before we got through all this stuff, and I was honestly, I was a different person.
yeah,
um, in my depression and right after I got out of the Marine Corps, and I was a jerk. I would have hated myself, like actually hated myself. And not having support there to even thrive or have an opportunity to grow as a couple, that is hard. That's mentally draining because it doesn't go away. Um, so you're right. I mean, to the point of allowing myself, which that was probably one of the key moments for me. Was right after that, I told myself I wasn't going to accept what her family had to say about me or what they felt about me, because the fact of the matter is they don't matter. All that
mm-hmm,
matters is my relationship with my wife and how we see each other and how we handle our situations together. And it took a long time to realize that. But when I finally did, it's just like cutting away the sources of, uh, you know, we'll say, just the emotional junk that comes with that. Um, and as you start kind of allowing yourself to trim the fat, you quickly start realizing how much weight you can actually bear
mm-hmm,
and how much you were actually carrying the entire time.
mm-hmm.
And it's okay to let it go.
Yeah,
I think acceptance is a big problem, especially from the family front. And, you know, when you realize that the only person that really has to accept you is you, and you get through that hurdle, of accepting yourself as you are, and understanding you have your faults and you need to grow. Well, then for me at least, everyone else kind of followed suit. I didn't make my wife try to work with me or support me or anything like that. She wanted to do it on her own because she could see I actually had something to fight for, and that I was working towards something, and I had changed my mentality, and that attracted her back, I guess, my direction. And after that, you know, you get your friends and family, or some of them at least, they start trying to do what they can to support you and being open and honest about some of this stuff. um, it really changes your outlook on what being alone truly is,
mm-hmm,
because the only time that I anymore think I'm actually alone is if I were out in the middle of the desert by myself. Um, and if I can't see people for miles, I would I wouldn't even say that I'm alone then. I've still got people that care about me and that are my cheerleaders. And I might have just as many people that want to watch me fail, but knowing that I have people in my corner to cheer me on and to motivate me, um, after I've learned that I am my own motivation. I don't need anybody else. After kind of getting through that, it's more of just the, icing on the cake, really, or the
Mm-hmm.
cherry on top. Um, and
Beautiful.
so, yeah, you just kind of, you live, or you choose to live, then you learn, then you grow, um, you stop kind of taking all of the stuff that comes with, um, you know, this, just the depression. I mean, you stop dealing with it. Not that you stop dealing with it, but like you stop accepting that it has to stay that way and that you
Yes.
deserve it. And once you do that, it just becomes so easy to keep moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story and being an example of how to go forward and live for you and live for love.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
Well, I'm
great. I
super
cannot wait to see your films and what you put out in the world.
Well, I'm super thankful for you reaching out. I mean, I kind of was just like, well, I've got something. We'll see if I can do anything for anybody else. And yeah, so I mean, I'm very appreciative of the time, and I just really, I kind of just hope that with everybody that does listen, and as it gains attention and gains a fan base as it gets larger and larger. I'm pretty well an open book for people too. So, I would be, if anybody's got questions or is trying to figure out how to handle some of these things. 'Cause, I mean, I know I'm not the only one. I'm just
Mhm.
fortunate enough to have made it through, and fortunate enough to, I basically have been here, and I'm one of a billion, you know.
Mhm.
So if I can do anything there, I'm happy to do it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening. Remember that you are loved, you are worthy, you are valuable, you are meant for more, and that it really does get better. If you are in crisis, there are numbers that you can call or text to get the help that you need. That information for Canada and the US is in the description below each episode. If you are in immediate crisis, please call 911. We love you, and I hope you'll listen again.